All right, everyone. Today, before we get started, there's something I want you to do. I want you to take both your hands, ball them into fists, and put them together. Your two fists put together like this is roughly, give or take, about the size of your brain. So this clump that's bouncing around inside of your head is what processes everything. What you think, what you feel, what you see, what you think you see, all your bodily functions. All of it is regulated by that clump in your head about the size of both of your hands put together. Now, when it does come to the brain, there's a lot of things we do understand. There's a lot of things we don't understand. There are things that fall in somewhere in the middle. So keep that in mind as we kind of go through this. This is going to be an overview. We're not going to go crazy in depth into the brain. Take a neuroscience course for that. But what this does is this is really the center of all the biological stuff that makes up our psychology. Because again, this is the brain. It controls so much. And there's a lot to it. And there are parts of your brain, if you want to look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, there are parts of your brain that are older than trees. So think about that. In your brain, there are parts of it that have been around longer than trees have been around. That's if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint. And our brains are this combination of very, very old and very, very new. And, like, for example, if you have ever been scared, like if somebody had ever like jumped out and scared you, somebody surprised you, and for a brief second you froze, that's the old, very old part of your brain. Okay? That's that part that's kicking into action. Or sometime maybe you've been like, oh, you're scared, you're watching a movie, so you slink down and you try to hide. That's actually a very old reflex in your brain. That's to keep a predator from ripping at your throat. So these are things that are, again, very, very old. And the part of you that thinks and rationalizes that goes, you know what, I probably don't need to try grinding down the stairs because then I'm going to fall, land on my face, and knock out all my teeth. That's actually a very new part of your brain. The ability to rationalize and those types of things. So the human brain is a very, very interesting thing. It's actually the most complex, one of the most complex things that in existence. And there's a lot to it. So buckle up. So overall, like what I said, most complex organ in your body, or we know of right now, hundreds of different parts and functions. There's, again, so much to it, and we don't even have time to go through it all. But there are kind of, you could say, two big ways to look at your brain. You got your forebrain, your midbrain, and your hindbrain. Evolutionary psychologists, they kind of break it into two parts. You have your old brain, which is your hindbrain and midbrain. And then you got your new brain. This is your forebrain. You can break it up by lobes. You can break it up by hemispheres. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at it. Each of these views are valid. And each one can give a little bit of insight into what is our brains. So, for the most part, we're going to kind of follow the forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain model. So, general rule of thumb is this: the hindbrain, which is the part that's in blue. This is your very, very old part of your brain. This is where most of your autonomic functions are taken care of. Your heart rate, your blood pressure, how do those instinctual reactions to when, you watch somebody get their head blown off. Those types of things. Midbrain is your kind of middleman, slightly more sophisticated in actions, but the main purpose of the midbrain is your forebrain. It pretty much serves as the bridge between your base instinctual functions found in the hindbrain and your more intellectual, for lack of a better term, functions that are found within your forebrain. And it bridges those two gaps. So your hindbrain, in short, is your life support bodily functions. Sometimes people will call this your reptile brain because this is your oldest part. And this is the part that, in essence, gets us in the most trouble. Like when we get jealous for some weird reason, or we see somebody as a threat for some weird reason, or we get angry. Sometimes it can be a result of this part of our brain, in essence, taking control of us. More to it than that, but I'm simplifying. But this is, again, a very, very old part. Parts of this older than trees. This is actually located at the top of the spinal cord, and this also connects the rest of your brain to your spinal cord. So again, very, very important. But within your hindbrain is your medulla, and this actually forms kind of what we would call the brainstem. And this is the bridge that connects everything together. This is like the bridge, or better yet, the road that's on the bridge. And what the medulla does, sometimes it's called the medulla oblongata, but this controls your blood pressure, your heart rate, your breathing, all that stuff. All those basic autonomic functions right there. And yeah, a bit of random. Brainstem consists of the midbrain, the medulla, and the pons. It connects the cerebellum to the spinal cord. It's important to relay signals to the brain, spinal cord, because again, you need all your stuff to connect. Because think about it. You take your little finger, bend finger. You're thinking, I'm going to bend my finger now. Well, here's the thing. That's a cognitive thought. That's something that, you're realizing, hey, I am bending my finger. If I bend my finger, it does this. That is taken care of in your, more cognitive, more advanced part of your brains. The medulla and the brainstem itself, what this does is it connects the thought of, hey, what would happen if I started bending my finger, to actually going all the way down through your spinal cord, through your nervous system, all the other good stuff, to the point where you can actually bend your finger. So this is very, very important for that. Your pons, this is also found in your hindbrain. This connects your hindbrain to your midbrain and your forebrain. This connects all that stuff. And this is also why some people are really, really bad at hiding what they think. Mainly, you can look at somebody's face and go, yeah, I know exactly what they're thinking. Is this part? Because this is the part that controls those facial expressions. So if you see somebody and there's, you've been there, where it'd be like, I know you're mad. I can tell by your face. It's this. Your pons controls that, and yeah. So blame your pons if you're bad at, if you have a horrible poker face. Cerebellum is found right here at the very back, but this is sometimes called your little brain, and this pretty much coordinates your habitual muscle movements. So, like for example, sometime do this. Like when you're watching something, walk and follow with your head and everything else. Because you have, so like when you do that, when you're walking down the road and you see something and you're just like still walking, but your head is turning and all the other stuff, you have a lot of different muscle movements going. You got muscle movements in your neck, you got muscle movements in your eyes, muscle movements just with your body and how it's moving. You have all of those different muscle movements. The cerebellum coordinates all that. And so that way you can, while you're walking over one direction, watch something, be able to focus on that thing while you're also moving your neck and everything else. All of that is coordinated by your cerebellum. Your midbrain, What this does is this coordinates all your muscle movements with sensory information. So pretty much your kind of like what the cerebellum does, but this kind of helps coordinate that a little bit more. And also, a little bit side note, um, this is also where your eyes are wired directly into. Your eyes are your only organ that is wired directly into your eyes. Or your eyes are the only organ that is directly wired into your brain. All your others, they got to go through something else. But again, kind of like the example with the cerebellum, this kind of helps coordinate that as well. Like, when it comes to the turning the head and looking and doing those types of things. Neck muscles, eye movements, all of this is coordinated by this as well. But your most important piece is your reticular formation. This controls general body arousal, ability to focus, attention, those types of things. If this part did not work, we would fall into a coma. Like we would literally be coma boy and girl. Um, and again, when it comes to body arousal, these are things like you being aware of your existence type things. Like, oh, that's going on. I probably need to pay attention to that. Or, whatever. Those types of things. Things that you notice. And you're like, I need to notice that. I need to pay attention to that. That could be a threat. It could be a wonderful piece of pie. Whatever. And then your forebrain, this controls what we call thought and reason. For all of your uh, ideas, thoughts, opinions, this is where the forebrain kind of manages all that. And its size, the fact that it's so big, because we have the biggest ones being humans, its size is the one thing that makes us human. And you can actually blame eating meat for that, because, a little bit of a side note, when our ancestors discovered fire, those types of things, we learned to cook meat, which meant that meat, very high in protein, very high in vitamins, is really, really good for you. But what it does is when you cook your food, this is one of the reasons why we have one stomach. When you cook your food, what that does is that pretty much makes it easier for us to digest. So like, for example, if you eat a carrot, if you eat a raw carrot, you will get less nutrients than you would if it was cooked. That's why you cook your vegetables. Because that's how you actually get all the vitamins. Raw vegetables, well, they're good for other things. They clean out your digestive spout. But cooking your vegetables and stuff like that actually helps you get the nutrients. But as far as meat goes, meat is very tough. So you cook the food, you eat the cooked food, all the fibers are broken up, so it's easier to digest. Our brains we're able to grow and really develop. Like veganism is bad. I'm kidding, but not quite. But within your forebrain is your thalamus, and this sends important information to the correct part of the cerebral cortex. These are the lobes. We'll get to that in a little bit, but the thalamus is the part that does send all the pieces, parts, all the sensory information that you take in, like what you see, what you hear. The thalamus is what sends it everywhere. Forebrain, you have your hypothalamus. These control your metabolic functions, your body temperature, your libido or sexual arousal, your sense of hunger, your sense of thirst, your endocrine system. We will look on this maybe on Thursday is what I'm thinking, but we'll see. But this is what, this controls everything. So like for some people that's, overweight, underweight types, there's some evidence that for some people who are overweight, because they constantly eat, because they're constantly hungry, one of the things that could be causing that is their hypothalamus is not getting the signal that tells them that they're full. So like, for example, you sit down, you eat a really big meal. There's actually a signal that your stomach sends to your brain saying, I am full, stop shoving food in me. And what happens is for some people, that signal moves very, very slow. So they don't get that. So their hypothalamus does not necessarily get that signal fast enough. So they just keep eating. And then there's other people who are the other extreme. They're really, really skinny. They don't eat a lot. Well, it's because they eat. That signal shoots really, really quickly to their hypothalamus. Boom, they're full. So that's just one of those things that's there. Also within your forebrain is your amygdala. This is vital to how we express and experience our emotions. We'll get to this a little later, but again, this is really is the kind of part that helps us know what kind of emotion to show at certain situations. This is tied to the hippocampus. This is key to our memory system, and because what happens is our emotions and our memories are actually interconnected to a certain extent, because certain emotions will actually help you remember things. Like for example, well, this is a case in point. When you're scared or when you're afraid or even if you're angry, what happens is it's actually harder to remember things, because what happens is this. Say like you're in a regular classroom and I bust in and I start screaming and yelling and I throw things at you and I just pretty much make life a living hell for you. What happens to your brain is a lot of things happen, but as far as your memory goes, what happens is you have what's called an affective filter, and it drops over pretty much your brain. And what it does is it tries to filter out things that could be traumatic. So if it filters out traumatic events, so you're scared, you're angry, your brain starts filtering out traumatic things or things that could be traumatic. After the fact, you don't necessarily remember what just happened, because your brain literally filtered out everything that was happening because your emotional state was what it was. And that's just one example. Cerebral cortex, this is the thing that everybody sees when they see the brain. This is the outside part of your brain. This is the wrinkly, bumpy things with fissures and grooves and all those other things. That's actually important. We actually need those wrinkles, because what those wrinkles actually do, because if I was to take your cerebral cortex and stretch it out, it would be about 3 times the size of what is your brain. So if I was to stretch out your cerebral cortex, it would be 3 times bigger, and that's the thing that gives humans all the computing power we do, because we literally have 3 times the surface area in our skull than what actually would fit in our skull. And this is where, again, where a lot of our neurons come to play, when they form new connections, neurogenesis, those types of things. Now you got your left brain, right brain thing. This is important. Pretty much rule of thumb. Left brain, your analytical side. Right brain, your creative side. And so much more. Because what happens is this. You literally, as a person with a left side and a right side to your brain, you have one foot in order in the world you understand, your left side, and your right side of your brain is in chaos with all the things that could happen. So, like, for example, rule of thumb, most people are right-handed. Right side of your body controlled by your left side. Right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. Now what happens is writing is a very, very exact thing. You have to write your letters just the right way, or you can write, based on the letters and what you do, you can write, "Hi, how are you?" You can write, "Your mother has a hairy back," or "Zong Jones cooks his meat," or some other sort of gibberish. So there are very, very specific rules that you have to follow if you're going to write. Hence, the left side of your brain kicks in. because it's very, very ordered and attention to detail. So those very, very exacting letters that you have to use in order to spell the words, well, that's your left brain. That kicks in. Your right side is really the part of you that sees things in pictures. This is the part of you that, if I were to flash an image, this is the part of you that would interpret that and go, that's what that means. That's a monster. That's a witch. That's a goblin. That's a unicorn. That's a weird dude. That's a hobo. That right side of you sees the picture, and that is the side of you that is able to really come up with the nonverbal ways of understanding the world. When someone says get the picture, that's because they're talking to literally the right side of your brain. And so yeah, this again, that's just one example. So again, a lot of people, they look at the brain, oh, your left is your, rational side, your right side is your, creative side. Yes, but again, there's so much more to it than that. And you actually use both sides, like 100%. Like, it's not a 50-50 thing. It's 100 and 100. That's why you can sometimes watch something and be like, oh, like watch a movie or something. Like, you could be sitting watching Infinity Wars, and you can be like, well, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Like, you could rationally lay out the plot. That's your left side. Your right side is going, wow, this is deep. This is really deep. It's so sad when Gamora got thrown off in so Thanos could get the Infinity Stone. Spoiler alert. And then you got your lobes. And there's a bit more to the lobes than just the lobes, but these are kind of another way how your brain is subdivided. Your frontal lobe, these are your executive functions. Your thinking, your planning, your organizing, your problem solving. Your emotions are regulated through here, especially things like anger, behavioral control, your personality. Your motor cortex, that is in control of your movement. Sensory cortex, this is the part that kind of integrates your sensations. Parietal lobe, this is your perception. This is how you make sense of the world, things like arithmetic, spelling, all that stuff. And then your temporal lobe, your memory, your understanding, your language, right there. And then in the back, your occipital lobe, this is what controls your vision. So if you really want to feel your occipital lobe, this is actually pretty easy. Just take your hand, put it back here, around where your neck is, or right above where your neck is. That's your occipital lobe. Frontal lobe is right here, the front, so pretty much where your brow is. Your parietal lobe is about, right here at the top. And then your temporal lobe is kind of right where, in front of your ears, where your temples are. And that is pretty much a rough overview of your brain, at least as far as our purposes. But yeah, just remember that there are, again, parts of your brain that are positively ancient, parts of your brain that are relatively new. And there's a lot of different parts that do a lot of different things. And yeah, that's actually pretty much it. Peace out.